Welcome to the Inclusion Think Tank podcast, where we talk about inclusive education, why it works, and how to make it happen. This podcast is brought to you by All In for Inclusive Education. Today, I welcome my guest, Julie Lang, who is an inclusion facilitator for All In, with over 29 years of experience teaching and coaching in the New Jersey public school system. Today, Julie and I discuss her recent presentation called I Think They Can, and how educators can shift from a deficit thinking to a strengths-based approach to benefit all of their students in the classroom. I would like to welcome everyone back to this new episode of the Inclusion Think Tank podcast, brought to you by All In for Inclusive Education. Today, I am joined by my guest, Julie, who is an inclusion facilitator with All In. So, Julie, thank you for joining me today, and I'm really excited that you're here as a guest today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. So, can we start the conversation with you sharing a little bit about yourself, your responsibilities, and what you enjoy most as an inclusion facilitator, and also share some fun things that you like to do?
Yes, so I've been with All In since 2020, and prior to that, I taught in a public school in New Jersey for 22 years, and I was a general educator, and we didn't have self-contained classrooms in my school. So I had students from very mild to very complex disabilities in my classroom. I was a general education teacher. So I didn't know anything different until I left the classroom to go work in the nonprofit field. I was a literacy coach, and in the districts where I worked, they had more segregated settings for students with disabilities. So I was shocked that not every school was like the one where I taught. And I had met somebody from All In. At the time, it was New Jersey Coalition for Inclusive Education, and I fell in love with the mission, and that brought me here. So for the last, almost 5 years, I've been working on our grant project, helping with systemic change and short-term technical assistance to provide training and coaching and consulting with schools, around, best practices in inclusive education. I love it. My initial degree is in early childhood education, and my master's degree is in reading education, K to 12. And I am currently a doctoral candidate studying instructional leadership, coaching, and mentoring. So I am currently working on my dissertation. So I am studying instructional coaching programs in the state of New Jersey. So my passion really is coaching and working with teachers. Um, and in my spare time, which I don't have a lot of right now since I am writing my dissertation, but when I do have time, I enjoy spending time with my family. Going on various outings with my family. I enjoy reading. For pleasure, when I can read a book and not a research article, I find that um, I find that enjoyable. I like to work out. I like yoga. I like swimming. I like, weight training, and I'm getting into more into cooking these days. So
Awesome. That's great. And congratulations on being the doctoral program. That is tough work, I am sure, on top of, keeping, a life outside of work and school. So, yeah,
yes,
congratulations on that.
yes.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So the next question I have is, how do you define inclusive education?
I define inclusive education as students with and without disabilities learning, socializing, growing together. They are all equal contributors to their classroom community, their school community, um, and um, together and belongingness is, what comes to mind. It's not just enough to educate students in the same classroom, but they have to all feel a sense of belonging, and they all have to be equal contributors in the classroom.
Yeah, I love the belonging piece. You know, you can have all
Mhm.
the other things there, but if there's not the sense of belonging, I think that's a very key piece to inclusive education. That that everybody's in the same room, but there's a sense of belonging there, and that everybody is there together. That's awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So this our conversation is shifting just a little bit. So we're recording this in February right now, which is hard to believe. The or thankfully, I should say January is over. It seemed to go on
Yes.
forever.
I'm with you on that one.
Yes, but we All In hosted their winter conference in January, and during that conference, you facilitated a presentation called "I Think They Can: From Deficit Thinking to a Strength-Based Approach." So, can you give us a brief overview of what your presentation was about, and explain the difference between a strengths-based approach and a deficit-based approach to education?
Yes. So, um, this idea of mindset is really important to me as a coach. um a big part of my work is helping teachers to recognize their mindset and to make positive changes in their mindset. Through my work, my doctoral work with coaching, I you know I've studied all different coaching approaches in education. There's cognitive coaching, there's student centered coaching, there's transformational coaching, and they all have their time and place. And this falls into the bucket of transformational coaching, where we need to coach educators around, their mindset, their emotions, and inclusive education really begins with a mindset shift. And um, schools have been constructed around the medical model of disability, where the medical model is where um, I break my arm, I go to the doctor, I get a diagnosis, I get a prescription, for, medication, physical therapy, and we fix what's broken. Um, we have formed our schools around that medical model, where, a student is showing a gap in skills. We test them, we give them a diagnosis, and then we give them a plan to, um, what we say fix or catch them up, where now we've shifted with inclusion toward the social model. And the social model of disability is that there's nothing wrong with the person. There is something in society or the environment that is limiting those individuals. So we need to take a look at, in schools, the classroom environment, the physical environment. We need to look at the affective environment, right? How are we fostering a sense of belonging? And we also have to look at our curriculum and what barriers are in the curriculum that are limiting opportunities for all of our students to be able to access the curriculum. So, this deficit thinking is when we focus on what students cannot or may not be able to do, rather than taking a strengths based approach and looking at what a student can do. And I have been doing various forms of this topic for probably about 2 years now, because I hear so much in the field and it's implicit. It's really implicit. We don't even realize how much we say it. They can't. These students can't. They can't. And then that thinking snowballs and leads into that thinking of they don't belong here. And that really triggers me as an inclusion facilitator. everybody does belong. And I got really tired of hearing that. And so I thought, you know what, we need to just grab the bull by its horns, and we need to tackle this because it's a really difficult topic to tackle because, we're calling educators to really reflect on their thinking and their language, because our actions determine, I mean, our thoughts determine our actions, so it's really important that we really reflect on our thoughts and try to reframe our thinking. Because I should go back, our thoughts determine our words, which determine our actions. Um, so
Yes,
that's where
that
this topic
is,
evolved.
yeah, and that's so true. How our thoughts and turn into our words and then our actions, and it's really, I think that's for me, being that I have lived with a disability my whole life, and I've been hurt. I've been told, quite often of you can't do this because of, your disability. And again, with the medical model, I love how you brought that into the conversation, the medical model versus the social model, where it's just like,
Mhm.
I don't need to be fixed. Like I am who I am,
Exactly.
and I am whole and complete how I am. It's just society and things are inaccessible to me as a person who uses a wheelchair a lot of times. Um, so if we help fix those things,
Mhm.
those types of barriers, then maybe things would be more accessible and therefore result in more inclusion for those
Mhm.
of us with disabilities. So it's really,
Exactly.
yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
really great. And we often hear, we often see in movies the whole medical model of the person with the disability, and they need to be fixed and healed and all those types of things. And it's okay to have people with disabilities in the world. Like, we're here.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with you, and
Right.
you have strengths, and you are a valuable person. You're a valuable contributor to society, and it's up to society to be able to remove those barriers so that you can enjoy and participate in life to the fullest, right?
Absolutely.
um and it start we do a lot of work with universal design for learning, where we look at curriculum and we say what barriers are there, and we work with teachers in reframing the barrier from the student to the curriculum or the environment. So instead of saying these students can't read, you would shift it to text complexity could be a barrier. So I've kind of backed up and, kind of, made this training almost, like out of that. Let's have a whole training on deficit thinking and deficit language,
Yeah, it's
in order
really,
to get to that point.
yes, yes, it's really great. And I think, having a training like this can help um, bring awareness to those educators of, just the little thing, and how you said, like, reframing something, how that can make such a big difference. Can make such a
Yes.
big difference. So speaking of that, can you give one or two examples of how educators can shift from their deficit thinking to a strengths based approach? And why
Yes.
is it important for educators to focus on their students' strengths rather than their weaknesses?
Yes. So, um, so first, I think it's important to define deficit thinking. So when we have deficit thinking, we are it's this belief. So Heinbach has defined deficit thinking as the belief that there is a prescribed correct way of being known as the norm. So anyone who operates outside of the norm of that is operating at a deficit. So um, then we entirely focus on bringing people into the norm rather than changing the norm to accommodate others. So That is where deficit thinking, uh, that is like one of the definitions of deficit thinking. So in education, it focuses entirely on what students may not be able to do, and it discourages teachers and administrators from acknowledging and recognizing the positive values and traits and dispositions of students. It's harmful because we assume that we can't support a student, and it leads to educators lowering expectations for the student. We always want to keep high expectations for all of our students, even our students with disabilities. So, one way that we can do this is always, always, always presume competence. And we need to assume that even students that have a language, that have limited language abilities, we have to presume competence. I saw somewhere recently, I don't remember where it came from, but it said in society, we presume the signs of intelligence to be reading and language. So if somebody has difficulty reading or speaking, we tend to assume that they're not capable, and that is not true. The barrier might be speaking or reading, but it doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. So the way that I help educators to reframe deficit language is to um, describe describe the challenging like behavior, or what we would call deficit, thinking in observable terms. So for instance, let's say an educator came to me, and or I was in a classroom, and they kept saying to me, the student is so impulsive, they have no self-control, they're always calling out during the lesson, they're disrupting the lesson. I would say to them, let's think about the behavior. Um, if we were to turn that behavior into a strength, what do you see in that child? Well, the child might be eager to participate in class because they're participating. They're just they're just doing it in a way that may not be appropriate, for the manageable lesson. So I might say to the teacher, okay, so let's take a look at how the student responds. They might need more kinesthetic opportunities to respond. Or let's take a look at your opportunities to respond. Are you just calling on one person at a time? Can you give them all whiteboards or have some type of thumbs up, thumbs down? Could you play, four corners, something like that? And then how could you reframe what you would say to a child? Like you might keep telling that child, you know, sit down, stop calling out. What's a positive, thing you could say to that child? And it would be like, I see you're eager to respond when a question is asked. So reframing from, the student has no self control to this child is eager to respond. Same child, same behaviors, but you're looking at it from a different lens. Um, I also, my go to question is when I hear things like they don't belong, is what is the impact of holding that thought? And that's a question posed by Elaine Aguilar, who is the guru of transformational coaching. So if somebody said to me, they don't belong here, I would say to the teacher, what is the impact of you holding that thought? Because if your thoughts become words, become actions, right? If you think a child doesn't belong in your class, do you think they feel that they belong in your class right now? You know, um, it's a tough question to ask and to be asked. But I think it's time that we address it in education.
I when you said that, I was like, wow, that hurt. Like,
Right?
I was like, wow, I didn't even say that, but like that hurt having that question, like thinking about that being
Right?
asked,
Like
like, wow, what is the impact of holding that, like
holding that thought.
that
Like,
thought?
you
Wow.
know, like, and even like this student is so far behind, like, okay, what is the impact of you holding that thought? Like, what can they do?
Hmm.
Let's build on what they can do instead of what they can't do, or
Yeah.
what you think they can't do.
And that was a
I was
great
in for
example you just used with, saying that student is so far behind because that can easily turn into, well, there's nothing else we can do now. And,
exactly.
so
It keeps you
they're
in that
always just going to, yeah,
deficit
it keeps you
spiral.
there. Right.
Exactly. It
Wow.
keeps you.
Yeah.
And I I was coaching in a classroom last week, and the focus was positive behavior. And it was a really challenging classroom, lower elementary, and there was 3 students that were refusing to do work, and they were just wandering around the classroom, and the teacher was very frustrated. And I took the lens. I had told her, I'm going to just observe the students. I'm going to observe what they do, where they go. Um, and I observe them from the lens of what is making them tick right now. Where are they going? What area of the room are they gravitating towards? And that told me a lot about the students. Like, I was able to debrief with the teacher, and and we talked about each student, and what they were not doing, and what kinds of activities they were gravitating toward.
Mm.
So, for instance, instead of giving these students worksheets, that child is gravitating toward blocks. How about we, you know, take some of the blocks in your classroom, and maybe um, post-its with words on it, and then the student can put it in order, or they could build words with cubes. She actually had cubes with words on it. How about we take them out and build sentences with it? This student likes art. How can we incorporate that into lessons and things like that? How can we build on what students strengths are, what their interests are, um, and start to see them in a we see them in a different light, that way. Um, so taking that strengths based approach can make a huge difference.
Yes. Yes. And I like the example that you also gave a few minutes ago about, um, the child that might call out, but changing that to saying, I see you're eager to respond. Like that, like, and that just as just as much as I felt like the hurt when you said, what is the impact of you holding that thought, when you said the student is eager to respond, that gave me like encouragement, like, oh yeah, I am eager to respond. Like I can see, I can put myself in the student's place and say like how that, that would change the way that I'm thinking, like, oh wow, yeah, I'm excited to
Yes.
respond to these questions. And that's why I'm calling out, like, okay, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, so that's
exactly.
yeah, so that really does make a difference for sure. And again, just thinking about my own life of living with a disability, and hearing from society, whether it be educators or just as I got into being an adult and being in the workforce, and just hearing the negativity, but thankfully having a strong base in my family and friends who told me, like, oh no, you can do whatever you want to do.
Yes.
You know your realistic limitations. I know my realistic limitations. I'm not going to be out here climbing ladders or anything like that. That's just not, I don't want to do that, or playing football, for example. I don't want to do that either. Doesn't sound fun to get knocked around like that. But, knowing that I can do whatever it is that I want to do if I, put in the work, and just really, have that strong base of people supporting me. And that's where it's very important to have that strong base in the school systems of educators supporting their students, and giving them that positive, and the strengths, focusing on their strengths and not their weaknesses. That can be very impactful on someone as they grow older.
Yes, I have. I have a quote that I absolutely love, and I have it at the end. I had it at the end of my presentation, and I think somebody actually took a screenshot and put it on Instagram. It's very powerful. It's by Robert Conklin, and it says, "If human beings are perceived as potentials rather than problems, as possessing strengths instead of weaknesses, as unlimited rather than dull and unresponsive, then they thrive and grow to their capabilities."
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
yeah,
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 that's cool. Now I have to put that on my Instagram. Thank you. That's great.
yeah.
Wow.
I'll email it to you later so
Yes,
you have
thank
it.
you. And that's so, and it's
You
so
know,
true.
every person in this world has something to contribute. And,
Hmm.
um it's such a shame when, our students are, you know, not, um, their strengths are not cultivated,
Hmm.
um, and, um, so, taking that strengths-based approach, it's a best practice in inclusive education, and really in education, it should be,
Yes.
a best practice with all of our students, building on strengths, building on what they can do, um, trying to reframe, um, you know, our what we would say is a deficit into a positive. Keeping high expectations for our students,
Hmm.
presuming competence. I can't say it enough.
Yes. This is this is a great, great conversation. I'm really thankful to have this conversation with you. And I just have one last question I am asking of all of my guests.
Mhm.
Just because we are in, by the time this episode comes out, we're in the high 50s of the number of episodes we've put out.
Nice.
So I'm trying to gather some resources that our guests enjoy. So if you could share
Yes.
some of your go-to resources for inclusion, it can be a movie or books, websites, YouTube videos, whatever it is that
Yes.
your go-to, what you recommend for people to check out as far as inclusion.
I love the Shelley Moore 5 More Minutes videos on YouTube. If you're an educator, those are great. She also has podcasts that are great. Um, I um, I like all of Julie Costin's books. I've been reading some of hers for educators as well, for inclusive classrooms. As far as movies go, I love um, I love the movie Intelligent Lives. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
I believe it's on Amazon Prime, Intelligent Lives. It follows three young adults with disabilities as two of, I believe, yeah, one is at Syracuse University in the certificate program. Um, there's a young woman who they are using person-centered planning to help her find um, a job that's a good fit for her. And then there's a young man, I think he's a senior in high school, junior or senior, who has autism and, you know, uh, limited verbal capacity, and they're trying to foster his, find a good fit for him, when he's done with high school, and he loves art. So I love that movie. I believe it's on Amazon Prime. It came out a few years ago.
I will check it out. I
Hmm.
had a guest on a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the Peanut Butter Falcon movie, where it's a young, uh, well, not young. He's younger than me, so he's young. He has a disability, and he wants to become a professional wrestler. And it was such a great movie. I watched it over the weekend.
Oh,
So,
I'll have to add that to my queue.
yeah,
Peanut Butter
yeah.
Falcon?
Peanut Butter Falcon. Yeah,
Okay.
it was a good movie. Really fun
Mhm.
to watch. So, but thank you so much for having this conversation, and just a way to provide more more resources and more uh, positive ways of thinking for our educators who are in the classrooms with students every day, and just having that mindset shift of switching to a strengths-based approach, and
Mhm.
what what a good thing, a good impact it can have on all of the students when their strengths are focused on is can't be stressed enough. So
Yes. Yes.
yes,
One last thing,
yes,
because I'm have my literacy passion, I also am a big advocate of teachers using books, whether picture books at the elementary level or novels at the middle high school level, with that feature characters with disabilities in a positive light. So I have a whole Padlet of resources on that. So if anybody's
great.
interested in that, they can email me.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you so much. That is, I love books, and they have gotten so much, um, they've gotten so much better with including topics about disabilities in books at all
Absolutely.
age levels.
Hmm.
From the
Yes.
earliest, from the early education through middle school and high school, and they just turned one of the books into a movie recently. I think it was Out of My
Out of my
Mind. It's
mind.
called. Yes,
Yes.
yes, that a
Yes.
lot of kids have read through their middle school or high school years. So it's really really great to see. I'm really excited to to see those changes taking
Yes.
place, and even with the popularity of Wicked, with them using a woman to play Nessa Rose, who is actually a wheelchair user and not an actor
Yes.
playing a wheelchair user. Uh, those types of things are so important to see and to have included in our
Yes.
in our books and our movies, television shows, and all of that. So um, but Julie, thank you again for this conversation. It was really great, and it really is, something that encouraged me as well to, just always be mindful, and mindful of our way of thinking about ourselves and about the way we think and perceive others, and just to keep those positive thoughts coming for everybody. So,
Yes. Yes.
so thank you so much, and have a great day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We thank you for listening to this episode of the Inclusion Think Tank podcast. This podcast is brought to you by All In for Inclusive Education. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Stay tuned for new episodes of the podcast premiering every 2 weeks. We're all in. Are you?